of the Mason-Dixon. This is the Week in Review at the Abbeville Institute. Here is your host, Brian McClanahan.
Welcome back to the Week in Review at the Abbeville Institute. This is your host, Brian McClanahan, and this is episode 156, covering the week of February 4th through February 8th, 2019. Glad to have you back on the program. Very glad to be here. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Abbeville Institute, like our Facebook page at Abbeville Institute, and of course subscribe to our YouTube page at Abbeville Institute. If you go to our webpage, abbevilleinstitute.org, that's ABBEVILLE, abbevilleinstitute.org. Give us an email address. We'll give you a free ebook. You'll get our daily dose of Dixie Monday through Friday and our weekly email on Saturday or Sunday, which includes a link to this podcast. Also, don't forget to download our free mobile app. You can go to your favorite web application store or mobile application store, Google Play, iTunes, wherever you get your apps for your mobile devices. Look for Abbeville Institute. Come up with our app. It is free of charge. Go out there and get that. And you can get the Abbeville Institute on the go, whether it's the website, the podcast, all of our lectures. All of that material is available on the app, free of charge. Also, don't forget that we exist on your generous contributions alone. So if you'd like to make a tax-deductible contribution to the Abbeville Institute, please do so at abbevilleinstitute.org. At the top of the page, you'll see a button that says support. Under that, you'll see donor options. You can click on that. You can donate monthly or annually, or just give us a one-time gift. So all those options are available. And you can also support the Institute by buying your Abbeville Institute apparel. If you click on the button, that support button where it says shop, you'll go out to our apparel website where you can buy your Abbeville Institute shirts, hats, golf towels, fleece, jackets, a lot of great stuff. So go on out there and do that. And a couple of other things. We are doing free online Jefferson seminars at the current moment. We've got 2 sessions out of the way. We have 2 left in the month of February, February 12th and February 19th. They feature yours truly, and we cover Albert Taylor Bledsoe's Is Davis a Traitor? So all you got to do that, to get those, is just go to our Facebook page. We provide a link for it there. Just before the sessions begin, you click on that, go on over to the YouTube page, which is actually my personal YouTube page. You can subscribe to my YouTube page as well. It's just go out and look at YouTube for Brian McClanahan, and you'll get my channel, and you can go through that way. But otherwise, you've got this. It is free of charge. We're going through the book. We've got 2 sessions left. So go out there and get those. They also are all available on my personal page in replay form. If you missed it, you can get that. And last, some somber news. One of our contributors, he actually did some cartoon work for us and some graphic work. Unfortunately, he passed away suddenly on Sunday of this week. And he was young, 41 years old, just died suddenly in his sleep. And we on our Facebook page, we have a GoFundMe page for his family. They were a homeschool family, had a young son. And so we're asking if you would like to contribute and help out his family in this very difficult and tragic time. You can do that as well. His name is Matthew Silber. So if you go to GoFundMe and you want to look up Matthew Silber, Silber, you can find the GoFundMe page for him there. So consider doing that if you just want to help out his family. He did a lot of great work for the Institute and other groups as well. He's donated his time. And so it's a very tragic and sad story. And if you'd like to help Matthew's family out, his wife and son, that will be a great place to do it. And when I say the cartoons, if you've seen some of the ones where Matthew Silber, we actually just reviewed his book last week, the Snowflake Buddies, and if you've seen the cartoons where the Confederate the guys bulldozing Confederate monument, or the cartoons, or you've seen the one with the Confederate soldier getting decapitated, that's Matthew Silber. So he's done a lot of great work for us, and please help out his family if you desire to do so. All right, that said, let's get into the week that was at the Abbeville Institute. We had a lot of really interesting articles this week. A couple actually I would say 3 go together, and then 2 work together as well in terms of history. So let's start with the first piece of the week, is Secession, the Answer. This is by Boyd Cathy, and of course, I'm sure everyone now knows about the Covington High School boys in Washington, D.C., and what happened there, and the media's attempt to essentially have a character assassination here with these high school boys, right? I mean, this is the same media that often says, well, you can't criticize high school kids, they're just kids, unless of course, they're on the other side of the political spectrum. Then you can criticize them, you can dox them, which means you go out and find all their information, publish it online, their family information. You can do all of that because they are on the other side of the political spectrum. But if they're on our side of the political spectrum, you can't do that. So you had this situation where these boys were not doing anything, actually. In fact, they were on the receiving end of a whole lot of taunting and simply tried to have some high school chants and other things to drown that taunting out. And the media immediately backtracked once they figured out that, there could be a lawsuit here and some other things. But Boyd actually brings up, Dr. Cathy brings up some interesting points here. We have two irreconcilable groups in America now. I mean, the identity politics, all of that stuff is getting to a point where it's becoming so nasty that perhaps a divorce is necessary at this point. And this is what Marcus Ruiz Evans in California is saying. Look, I mean, those of us on the left, we need to realize that we're not always going to win elections, that even the Democrats in power aren't necessarily going to go as left as we want because they have other concerns. And you've got Democrats who, of course, are maybe not as in tune with our progressive agenda. We saw the progressive agenda and what some of the things they want just came out yesterday. No air travel in 10 years, all these kind of things. These people are certainly pushing the envelope to the left. And so maybe it's time for us, for the lefties, to get out of the union too. So what this piece gets into is the fact that we've got a situation with the United States where it seems like these two camps are never going to get along. And so perhaps, again, it's time for an amicable separation. Now, the interesting thing about this idea is that the real problem here, of course, is nationalism. It always has been. It always will be. We can't have a one-size-fits-all solution to these large problems that are in America. And if we still had a decentralist Jeffersonian position, whether it was real federalism, whether it was the ability to use nullification or state interposition, none of these issues would really be a problem. Of course, this is all magnified because of social media and other things, and it seems like every single day there's a new outrage. And we see what's going on in Virginia and all this. We have an article on that next week. Every single day there's a new outrage, some new fake outrage in America. Somebody doing something that somebody doesn't like, and the left goes crazy or the right goes crazy or whatever it is. And so we want to ensure that those people in New York do what we tell them to do, or those people in Alabama do what we tell them to do, or look at the outrage in North Dakota or wherever it is, without realizing that all of that outrage could be better, it could be stopped if people just minded their own business in their own backyard and took care of their own situations and stopped having social media outrage over everything. But that's the Jeffersonian position. This is something we talked about in November at our conference in Texas. It's something we've talked about at the Institute over and over again. It's also part of our mission to talk about identity and Southern identity and what's valuable in the Southern tradition. And here you have these kids from Kentucky simply wearing a hat that's a pro-Trump hat, and that makes them the enemy of the state. It makes them the enemy of the media. It makes them the enemy of everything, because they're, again, exercising their opinion on a hat. They were at a pro-life rally in Washington, D.C., and so they were being taunted. I mean, it's just a silly story in so many ways. It's a non-story, actually, a complete non-story, but it shows how far we've gotten in 2019 in America. And as Boyd points us out, we have a pressure cooker here. And how long is it going to take for it to boil over? I mean, I hope it never does. I hope we simply just grow up and be mature adults and and say, look, these are kids. Stop doing all these faux outrage things. I mean, this is just stupid. I think people are getting tired of it in a way, generally in America. And so maybe we could just forget about all that stuff and let's start having a mature adult conversation about live and let live. Let's have a mature adult conversation about Jeffersonianism, right? I mean, where we have people of different views and different things in different areas, and that's okay. That's okay. But of course, he talks about the fact that you've had, not just on the left, but also the right, the conservative industry, Conservative Inc., got involved in this and criticized these kids and everything else. It's just, and that's part of the problem, because Conservative Inc. really are nationalists. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. we're talking about nationalism being the issue. And that's always been the problem. From the time the Constitution was ratified until now, nationalism has always been the problem, because the nationalists want to ensure that we have a one-size-fits-all unitary political, economic, social position. And to do that is going to require that some people have to be put in line. And, of course, between 1861 and 1865, that involved going and killing people to do that. And hopefully we never get to that point again. That we can, again, be mature adults and realize that live and let live is a better and more healthy position. But Boyd says, maybe secession is the answer. Maybe we just need a divorce. Maybe people just need to go their own way. And is that not a mature position to take at this point? You can be your lefties wherever you want to be. We'll just let you be. Why can't we let you be? Just let us be. It's good. We're fine. We're fine. We'll just go our own way and get along that way. And as a corollary to that, we had Paul Graham's piece on Wednesday, Confederate Phobes. Now, we published his piece, Confederate Phobia, which actually turned into a book a couple of years ago. And this is just a follow-up. He gave a speech at a Lee Jackson dinner in January. And this brings up several funny anecdotes of the mass hysteria, the faux outrage, and all these things that happen, and how the media creates these situations that don't actually exist. In one particular case, it was I believe it was a priest walking through campus. He had his robes on with a rosary, an Orthodox priest, and the campus report went out that there's somebody wearing a Klan robe with a whip walking around campus. This is how deranged these people are. It's just silly. It's almost a mental disorder. And as he points out, Confederate phobia is a mental disorder. You have a phobia to all things Confederate, and it needs to be treated as such, a mental disorder. You need help. You need medication or long-term therapy because you're the one suffering from a disease, not the people that have the statues or the flags, or particularly if it's a benign symbol. Some people use it incorrectly. Some people use it to be a nasty symbol of whatever their nasty views are. This happens. And there's nothing anybody can do about that, except say, I don't use it that way. But see, that's the thing. Nobody ever asks the people who actually have it, why do you have that? Well, this is why I do it. This is why I have this flag. They just say, well, because I think it's this. I define it because this is what I say it is. You can't have it. That's a disease. That's a disorder. And so this piece is funny. Some of the stories in here just absolutely hilarious. And it's funny, but it's also sad. Is it not sad that there are people running around that an American symbol, which are Confederate symbols, these are American symbols. They're not foreign symbols. These are American symbols created in America and flown by Americans for generations, used by Americans for generations for benign reasons. And I know that people bring this up and say, well, the U.S. flag has been used for all kinds of nasty purposes. It has, but of course, because some people do that, this is where the inconsistency comes in. Well, those are just people. That's not what it means to me. So we can have the flag. And of course, the flag, we know the flag did this X, Y, and Z, all these good things. And because some people use it incorrectly, that doesn't mean it's a bad symbol. Can you not say the same thing about Confederate flags? Is not the same thing? Does that not fit there too? It's the hypocrisy not dripping from that statement. So it's a benign thing. It's a symbol. It's a statue. It does nothing to anybody. And so that's really the situation we have in America, where we have derangement, which is the people in the media, the faux outrage. Then we have a mental disorder with Confederate phobia. And all this is being fueled, again, by nationalism. One size fits all. It has to be my way. It has to be this. I say this is what goes. And, of course, who's driving that? It's long been New England. It's a New England view of America. As Carrie Roberts said in our last summer school, we live in New England. If you want to know what New England is like, what New England's America is like, just look around what you got now. This is New England's America. They're the ones that made it. And people don't like it. People, in fact, hate it. Even if they're from New England, they hate it. That's why they all moved to the South, because they want to get out of New England, but they can't forget. Or they don't realize. I mean, we can't forget. They don't realize it. They bring New England with them. They can't get rid of it because it's cultural, right? I mean, this is the thing that people need to understand. All the things we deal with in politics, it's all political culture. It's all about where you're from, your background, your people, where they're from. It's political culture. If you haven't read David Hackett Fischer's Albion Seed, you need to read that because he gets into this idea of political culture and how important that is. These regional differences. It's one of the most important things we could read to understand where America where these American identities, and there are several where they come from, where the Southern identity actually comes from, New England identity, Mid-Atlantic identity. I mean, where these things actually come from, and there's different parts of the South. I mean, without question. So that's. This Confederate Phobia, this disease, this mental disorder, which is what these people, I mean, the fact that people will go out of their way to spend most of their time, quote unquote, tracking, I actually saw this the other day. Somebody said, I've been tracking the Abbeville Institute for years. Yes, we're so secretive. I mean, we have a website that's free with thousands of articles that are free, and lectures on the website that are free, and a podcast that you're listening to that's free, and we do conferences that are public, open to the public. All these things. This is all out there, but yet you have to track us. I mean, so people would actually sit around and, I've been tracking these people. What? Oh, you mean you've been going to our website? Wow, we're really secretive. You gotta watch us. It's just, it's silly. It's a derangement. And that's where we are with some of the people on the left. I mean, this is what I have to watch these people like a hawk. What for? I mean, because we publish public articles, lectures, which I dare say, any mature person would look at and say, what's the issue here? These people are talking about Southern history, Southern culture, Northern history, Northern culture. I mean, this is what they're talking about. Because they're diseased. They have a disorder, a mental disorder. That's why they do it. So, anyways, I mean, this is a funny piece. You should read it. Paul Graham is a good writer. And he wrote a very funny story. And then corollary to that is John Devaney's piece, Hamilton on Steroids, which was on Thursday. Just a wonderful piece. He gets to the fact, he talks about this $21 trillion in debt, but yet there's all these trillions of dollars that go missing. I mean, we had the $6 trillion. We've had $15 trillion. We've had, all this money. That's just, I don't know where it is. I don't know what happened. And people say, it's like, when you misspend $25 on something. Oh, yeah, $21 trillion. It's just, like $25. And, of course, the general government then pulled the plug on the ability to go out and track these things. And now they're back, and, of course, they're promising an audit and all. That stuff's never going to happen. But this is Hamilton's dream. The corruption. That is what people don't realize. The corruption. I mean, this is when Hamilton and Jefferson and Adams were having a conversation, and John Adams said, hey, look, the British Constitution, if it wasn't for the corruption, it'd be a pretty good Constitution. And Hamilton said, heck no, man. Heck no, John. It's the corruption that makes it great. It's the corruption that makes it all work. You see, and that's what we have now in Washington, D.C. It's the corruption that makes it all work. Everything there is corrupt. Everything. All these surface things, as John says, we can all sit back and enjoy the political theater of all the fake outrage, the fake identity politics, all that stuff, and realize that under the surface, all of that, underneath, is all of the corruption. All that is just window dressing. It's just the sauce on the salad or the gravy on the biscuits. That's all it is, right? That's all it is. Sauce on the barbecue, right? It's all the corruption underneath. That's the problem. That's all just distraction, because while all that's going on, you have all the corruption in D.C. That's the establishment. That's the swamp. Trump was, and people that put their faith in Trump, he's going to go and clean up the swamp. You could say this about a lefty. Well, maybe there's a lefty reform. You're going to go and clean up. They're never going to do any of this stuff because it's all the corruption. It's all just there. It's institutionalized. You can't get rid of it unless you have a real federal republic. As John says, unless we went back to the Articles of Confederation, maybe you could, where the central authority had nothing. And he talks about the John Taylor of Caroline and his warnings about what we would get. The opponents of the Constitution, what we would get if we adopt this thing. We're going to get some pretty nasty things. And we've got it. I mean, this was pointed out. And the funny thing about all that is Joseph Story saying, yeah, this is what they said we're going to get. This is what we got. And this is what it is. You see, that's the real Constitution. But that's not how the Constitution was sold to the states and why it was ratified. In fact, it was ratified in the very opposite meaning. So we've got real problems. Real institutionalized problems in D.C., and it's not just going up there and having a rebuttal to Donald Trump's State of the Union, talking about your family or whatever the case may be. And I mean, you pump all that money into D.C., you're going to have tremendous amounts of corruption, off the books corruption, and it's all through borrowing. And now you've got people saying, I mean, It's a position that's been around for a while, but yeah, we don't even need to worry about this. We'll just keep printing money. We'll just spend as much as we want. Just print it. No big deal. It's never going to. It's not going to affect anything. We just print it as we need it. Yeah, I mean that works so well. I mean, it's worked so well for all the countries that have tried it. Like Germany or Mexico or Venezuela. I mean, it worked great. You need money, just print it. Just print it. These people are so historically stupid. And that's the second part of this week, the stupidity, the historical ignorance of people. They are so historically stupid that they can't even get out of their own way. And that's because their education is indoctrination, not really education. They don't learn anything except slogans and platitudes and chants. And you see it when you see these people out protesting or whatever. They have an IQ of like 75. Even some of the members of Congress who run up there and look pretty in front of cameras have an IQ of about 75. And that's because of their indoctrination. Maybe their IQ is higher, but their understanding of things is about someone with an IQ of 75. And that's because of the historical indoctrination that we get in our colleges and universities. So we have the piece on Tuesday, Stealing History. This is about Lyndon Johnson, which... you gotta love landslide Lyndon Johnson. And this is a book review of the Robert Caro, The Years of Lyndon Johnson, Means of Ascent. This is about when Johnson came into power. So if you've never read Caro's biographies of Lyndon Johnson, they're really good. They are well written. They're fun to read. And even though Caro he's a leftist, but he does give it to Lyndon. He gives it to him. Now it's not the best biography of Lyndon Johnson at all. The best biography of Lyndon Johnson is J. Evetts Haley's A Texan Looks at Lyndon. And we've actually run, and the subtitle is A Study in Illegitimate Power. We've actually run a piece on the Institute about J. Evetts Haley. So that's the best book. But this book, look, Caro's book, he does get into some of the things, but Lyndon Johnson was as corrupt as they get, and this gets into this idea of the corruption, right? Lyndon Johnson lied, cheated, and steal. He stole his way to power. He used dirty tricks, and getting elected over Coke Stevenson, and it's typical of what these people do. And of course, now Lyndon Johnson is a saint. He's a saint. Actually, Charles Goolsbee, who wrote this piece, has this funny little paragraph at the end. He says, quote, former White House staffer Doris Kearns, who is a plagiarizer and an awful historian herself, recalls working with Johnson on his presidential memoirs. At the very end, Johnson wanted to substitute lies for truth. Often when she attempted to remain true to the record, Johnson would explode, God damn it, I can't say this, despite the fact that he had said it. Once he ranted, for Christ's sake, get that vulgar language out of there. What do you think this is, the tale of an uneducated cowboy? It's a presidential memoir, damn it, and I've got to come out looking like a statesman, not some backwoods politician. He concludes, Johnson had hoped to steal an honored place in history as he had stolen Coke Stevenson's place in the Senate. For most of us in Texas who remember the man and his legacy, Lyndon Johnson will always be a backwoods politician, but with none of the virtues of backwoods people. And that's the truth. I covered Johnson in my 9 presidents who screwed up America as one of the 9. He's awful, one of the worst in American history. And that one focused solely on his policies as president, violating his oath of office, not on the person that he was. And you could get into that too. I mean, Johnson was an immoral, awful person. But of course, the South does produce these people. We've seen it. The last Southerner, real Southerner that we had in office, not the one that was the fake Southerner from Connecticut, but the last real Southerner we had, which was Bill Clinton, again, corrupt, liar. The South produces these people. And so Southerners recognize them for what they are. It's just the outside world can't see it, it seems like. They're duped by it. And I remember, I guess it was, I don't remember if it was what magazine it was, but I think it was Southern Partisan. They talked about, hey, Bill Clinton, yeah, we know this guy. Everybody else just can't see it, but we know him because he's that slick greasy used car salesman in the South that everybody wants to avoid. But yet somehow Yankees just can't get enough of. And that's Lyndon Johnson, too. And then finally, the last piece of the week is by Phil Lee. Did Ulysses Grant own and rent slaves? And his answer is unequivocally yes. Ulysses Grant owned and rented slaves, no matter what people will tell you. In fact, he says Ulysses Grant is the correct answer to a crafty American history trivia question that asks, can you name the last slaveholding president? It was Ulysses Grant. Now, people try to deny this. People try to deny it, but the fact, he said you can't get over it. He says, here are the facts. When Grant married Julia Dent in 1844, he wedded into a slave-owning family whose patriarch was Frederick Dent. In 1850, Dent owned about 30 slaves, including 18 on his Winter Haven farm near St. Louis. After resigning from the pre-Civil War Army, Grant moved to the St. Louis area to earn a living as a private citizen in 1854. His first attempt was at farming, during which he used a number of the Dent slaves to fell trees, plant crops, and build a house for his family. Following the death of his wife, Frederick Dent moved into St. Louis in 1857 and rented 450 acres of Winter Haven to Grant. In 1858, Grant wrote his sister, I now have 3 Negro men, 2 hired by the year, and one of Mr. Dent's, which, with my own help, I think will enable me to do my farming pretty well. So there you go. He's got 3 slaves. At some point during Grant's time at Winter Haven, he also acquired personal ownership of a slave named William Jones. Later, Grant gave up on farming and in the spring of 1859 moved the family into St. Louis, where 4 slaves that had been given to Julia by her father served him. The next year, Grant gave up on St. Louis altogether and moved his family to Illinois, where he worked in one of his family's tannery shops. The year before the move to Illinois in 1860, Grant emancipated William Jones for diverse, good, and valuable considerations. Although good and valuable considerations is a legal expression that can include money among other factors, every Grant biography I've read assumes that Jones did not even partially purchase his freedom, but was instead given it. Beyond the above facts, many Grant supporters excuse his connections to slavery with at least 3 mitigating points. And so he gets into where the Grant supporters say, oh, no, this is just bunk. He really didn't sell, he didn't rent anything. But even Ron Chernow, Ron Chernow is one of the worst court historians. He writes these laudatory books on Hamilton or Grant. He is a terrible court historian for that. And so people would, I remember when I wrote my Hamilton book, just go read Chernow instead as much. Because Chernow is just so critical of Hamilton. Chernow, in that book, misses, or he the larger picture on some of the problems with Hamilton's character and some of the larger implications of Hamilton's machinations, which, of course, he's going to as a court historian. And even with Grant, he does the exact same thing. The idea is to produce a laudatory biography, and you can't do that if you're going to be critical of these people. And Phil Lee, of course, is critical of Grant, and rightfully so. He deserves it. Grant is awful. But that's not the accepted court position. I mean, for years, I remember when, Grant was considered one of the worst presidents in American history, but now, no, because our position has changed in America on what we think is good and bad and what we think is right and wrong for this type of stuff. And Grant is one that is now being his character is being revitalized, right? Rehabilitated. His presidency is rehabilitated. He was actually not that bad. He was trying to do the right thing in the South and these other kind of things. Forget about all the corruption. Forget about all the stuff. It's pre-war. Forget about all those things. Grant's still a good guy because he was trying to do the right thing in the South. You see, it all comes down to the South and what these people would do to the South and how they'd punish the South because the South deserves it. So, a lot of interesting stuff this week. The overall theme again is nationalism. And Grant is a national figure. We got to rehabilitate these national figures, make them better than they are. That's the point. That's the issue in America. If we could all just get rid of this nationalism, we would be so much better off. People could live and let live. People could live their own lives and not worry about whatever's happening in some other state that doesn't affect them. We could get rid of all the faux outrage, all of that stuff. It just wouldn't matter. Of course, it would give us nothing to talk about. Because we like to talk about the stuff that everybody else is doing and not worry about our own backyard. But that's American gossip for you. In fact, most of what passes for news today is simply nothing more than gossip. And most of what passes for history nowadays is simply nothing more than idle gossip. Until next time, good day.